All right, everybody, this is Kirsten Darrington. You just heard Jen Waterhouse. We are with the ZAP program, and we are here today to walk you through the signing process for your Tier 2 contract, and as well as walk through some of the contractual obligations that we hold you to as part of your Tier 2 funding. So thank you so much again for joining us. I'll basically spend the first half of this webinar walking through the contractual obligations and what's your Tier 2 funding, what is required of you as a Tier 2 funder or fundee. And then Jen will take some time to do a walkthrough live demonstration of how to sign your contract. So as we mentioned, we will mute your microphones during the presentation because we have so many people joining us. Again, thank you for being here. You can, as you have seen, share your questions in the chat box, which will pop up on the left. You'll just scroll. If you don't have it open yet, you can scroll to the bottom of your, is it the bottom right side of your screen? And there is a chat button that you can click on to see what's going on in the chat. Also, we'll track these questions. We'll try to answer them throughout the presentation, but then we will also take time at the end to answer them. So we'll make sure we don't lose any questions. Okay. So also, yeah, please let Jen know if you need anything or any connection issues. She'll watch those, and then I'll try to watch for them as well. So just shoot us an email or type this in your question or issue into the chat. Okay, so now with that out of the way, I guess what I'd like to say now is really just congratulations on your funding. This year, Jen, can I go to the next slide, or do you? Thanks.
There you go. So sorry, I was just typing a couple of things. I'm on it now.
You all know Jen's amazing. She can do 10 different things at once, in addition to controlling the slides. Okay, so this year, we wanted to say congratulations again on receiving funding. The theme this year was really just because of the impact of COVID on tax revenues. We are fortunate enough that with ZAP to not see a huge hit to our revenue stream this year, and we're largely able to maintain everyone's funding levels, or if you saw a dip, it was just a very slight dip. And I'm going to mute everybody. I got some feedback. So with that, we were able to, like I said, keep everyone's funding fairly consistent and award all applicants who applied. So this year we awarded 198 applicants. And we're projecting to distribute about $2.3 million in awards. So going to the next slide, over the next year, we will be working with you, Jen and I, to get your funds dispersed to you. As many of you know, we are a two-staff program, but we are here to help you in every way we can. So here's our contact information. We have both actually been working remotely since the spring. So today I'm in the office if you can see me, but many times we are out of the office. So we recommend you giving us a call, or our email is the best way to reach us at this time. Okay, so first, what I want to do is start by going over your contractual obligations and expectations as a grantee for Salt Lake County ZAP. So first, your contract limits, while it can be used for operating expenses, your contract limits your use of ZAP funds to just allowable expenses, and you are expected to spend them on the activities that you identified in your 2020 application. So you can refer to what that answer of on question 6 of your application for a reminder of what these are. So we also understand that if you receive less money than the amount projected during approval, your activities may be adjusted accordingly. So if you are however, if you are no longer able to do any of the activities stated in your application, please reach out to us. We know this is a year of a lot of uncertainty. We know you are all doing a marvelous job of adapting to unique circumstances brought about by COVID-19. So we want to just put a reminder here to be sure that your ZAP-funded activities are fully in line with current public policy for COVID safety as well, which is required in the compliance of laws section in your contract. So that's two things here. We want you to be make sure you're communicating with us if you have to have any changes, but also that your activities are following the state guidelines and the public health orders put out there as well. And if you have questions on this, please reach out to us. Okay. So as a reminder, ZAP funds cannot be used for any of the following expenses. So this is kind of a long list, but I do want to spend a little time walking through this because I know it is a long time from when you submit the application, when you sign your contract to when you get your awards. And it can, your activities will many times change. So as long as you are not doing any of these, you should be good to go. So ZAP does not fund events outside of Salt Lake County. We do not fund endowments. We do not fund accumulated deficits or debt retirement. We do not fund capital improvements. So that if you were remodeling your building or if you were building a sculpture, things like that. We do not fund lobbying expenses. We do not fund scholarships, purchase of awards, cash, or other prizes. We do not celebrate non-cultural celebratory activities, such as like a neighborhood party or a block party. There has to be a cultural purpose to it. We do not fund re-granting. We do not fund educational institutions receiving more than 50% of its funding from the state. So if you are an educational institution, you have to be an independent entity. We do not fund activities that are primarily religious in purpose. We do not fund magazines or newspapers. We do not fund radio or television broadcasting or activities intended for fundraising for endowments or capital campaigns. So long-term fundraising, really. We do not fund recreational, rehabilitative, or therapeutic programs. We do not fund social service programs, and no fireworks, no sister city programs, and rodeos. So we get really specific at that last part of that list, but I just wanted to walk everyone through and see if, make sure this was clear, especially before you signed your contract. So if there are any questions on this list, please drop those into the chat and we'll make sure we address them. Okay, so now a special note on COVID-19 and your funding. So if you cannot use your funds the way you detailed in your application that you had submitted in the spring, we really, really want you to reach out to us before you sign your contract so we can make sure we are on the same page with how you might be pivoting or adjusting your project. Also, a reminder, you cannot use that funds for COVID-related costs that are already being covered through another funding source. So this would be the Community Partners Grant or the SBA grant at Salt Lake County or say SHOP in Utah. So while you can use that funds for general operating expenses, and that may go towards equipment or it may go towards online activities or things you have done to adjust because of COVID, we want to make sure there's not double dipping with other funding that has already been received. And this is actually the same for every other source of funding you receive. And then also the third point on here, 2020 funds must be expended by December 31st, 2021, or returned to Salt Lake County. And if you have questions on that, if you're getting to the end of the 2021 year and you haven't expended your funds, please reach out to us and we can talk through that. So we still do expect you to spend your funds within the 12-month period you indicated in your application. So that's the first line of the timeline we want you to adhere to. But then if you can't do that, we then default to the December 31st, 2020 deadline. So again, any questions on all of this, please reach out to us. We are here for you. We want, it is in our best interest for you to keep your funding and use it in allowable ways. And we don't want to take back money if we absolutely don't have to. So we want to help you, work with you, make sure you can use the funds for the best possible use. Okay. Okay, so now we're at, sorry guys, I went off script. Okay, so now in your 2020 application, so this is where we're getting to your contract. You'll be able to find your 2020 contract in the contract tab, which you wouldn't have seen that before. It'll pop up now if you log in. You're going to see it under the application summary tab. So below your contract text, you will find 2 to 3 exhibit documents that you need to sign and save for, as well as signing your contract. So every organization will have an exhibit 1, which is a copy of your application. They'll have an exhibit 2, which is a copy of the logo usage and acknowledgement guide, which we want you to review. And many of you are going to be familiar with this. And then finally, some of you will have an exhibit 3 letter, which is basically a letter saying, oh, you noted this specific thing in your application, but this is not allowable. Please don't use that funding for that. So it's just something that you're reading to and being aware of. So check for those 3 exhibits and make sure they're there. If you log in and you don't see the first 2 exhibits, let us know. And okay. So please, and also I was supposed to say, please save a copy of your application for your records and it will live in ZoomGrants. Sorry, Jen, you can go forward. So your marketing and promotions staff should carefully review the logo guide, even if they've read it in previous years, just to be sure they understand all the requirements. I know Jen was great and recently made some updates. Not a huge overhaul, but just some things that we think would be more helpful to you as grantees. So your organization may receive contact from our staff in the next year regarding ZAP logo usage, just in the event that you might not be following the guidelines laid out in this guide. This guide can also be downloaded on our website along with the logo files. As more organizations are holding events online, we would ask that you use our logo in your online materials as well. So please refer to the guide for the appropriate way to utilize the logo. We give a lot of guidance on that. So finally, we do, back when we were in office, the ZAP program also has banners and posters that your organization can use at your events or in your buildings as part of your ZAP recognition. But again, because we know many of you are working, or we are working remotely, if you want to pick up a banner or a decal, we would ask that you set up an appointment with us to make sure we are here when you come to do that. Okay, so next, okay, getting into some of the invites. So as part of us being a ZAP grantee, your organization is contractually obligated to invite the Tier 2 Advisory Board to at least one event every year. This helps board members to experience the work your organization does and see firsthand what you're all about. So event invitations may be submitted through our advisory board invitation form online, which we're showing you how to get to here. And the event invitation form has been updated to allow you to invite board members to online events as well. So we're assuming that you're probably doing a mixture of online or in-person events, and we'd like you to invite them to whichever event you think is you would like them to see. So the digital invitation system, this helps ensure that we get so many of the invites we get out in a timely manner. So this form can be found on our website under the Tools for Currently Funded Grantees link on the left-hand column. Click on the advisory board invitation form link to be taken to that form to fill that out. And it is pretty slick. It's pretty easy to do. We prefer that you would send your invitations out well in advance of your event if you can. 3 to 4 weeks is preferred. Tell us about the event and who we should contact RSVP or if we have any questions. In the comments section on the form, let us know where tickets will be available or any other useful information that would be helpful for our board. We're asking that you please do not drop off physical invitations or tickets. We will be providing all these invitations electronically. And the ZAP program does not expect you to invite the ZAP Tier 2 board to your fundraising events. We understand that everyone should pay to attend fundraising events, so feel free to just invite them to your regularly scheduled events. Also, if you are, say, a museum and open during regular hours, feel free to invite them to your museum during that time as well. So it doesn't have to be a special or certain event. The same is true for all your free events. You are welcome to invite advisory boards to all of those. And then sending an invitation when you have things like this come up that you'd like the board to see. It really does help with their review process and building a relationship with you moving forward in future years. Okay, so now on to Now Playing Utah. This is another contractual obligation. We require you as part of recipient to post your events on nowplayingutah.com. So this is a one-stop shop for residents and visitors to find out what's going on in our community. Many of you already use this and are great about it, so thank you. And they've recently, actually, the website looks different. They just did an overhaul, so it looks, and I think they've added some components to make it even a little sleeker. So if you guys even have any feedback on using that, we would be happy to pass that along, just because we require our grantees to use it. So let us know how your experience is. So also, as part of your evaluation, you will have to demonstrate that you have posted events on this website. And then to do that, so the website looks a little bit different, but at the top of the page when you go to the site, that's how you can submit events. So you can see that orange arrow at the top of the screen here. The website will look a little bit different, but that'll be pretty similar.
Kirsten, let me remute everybody. We had a quick question from Catherine St. John's that virtual events are reaching outside of Salt Lake County. Do we count those attending remotely in our attendance numbers? So Catherine, we have, we'll talk about this a little more in a second, but we have redone the evaluation a little bit to make it easier for you to report those virtual numbers. We'll have you go ahead and just report all of the virtual numbers. If you do have a breakdown of where the attendees are from, which we know you can get for certain things, but it can be difficult to access for certain online events, you're welcome to provide that data. But for your virtual attendance, we'll just ask for the attendance overall, understanding that right now it can be a little bit difficult to break out some of those geographic numbers. If you have the ability to, that's great. If you don't, we just like the information that you do have, because we know that we're all kind of learning how to best capture the virtual attendance data. And Leslie Harlow had asked, we have trouble getting our virtual events to show up on Now Playing Utah. I'll look at the recently updated website. Thank you so much for that feedback, Leslie. If you continue to experience that, of course, Kirsten and I do not control Now Playing Utah, but we do work closely in contact with the individuals who do. And like Kirsten had mentioned, we're really happy to be able to pass along that feedback of any issues you might be having with it, because we want to make sure that we're helping them get as much of that feedback directly as possible. Then Ghulam had mentioned, I'm assuming Now Playing Utah requirement does not apply to a 2020 canceled event. Correct. When you have any events that you are planning on putting on, please put them on Now Playing Utah. If the events are canceled, of course, we do recommend going in and removing it from there. If you have posted it, one of the best ways to capture that is taking a screenshot or even doing a print screen and printing it as a PDF just so that you have it. But if you had an event canceled and you needed to remove it from Now Playing Utah, that's not going to count against you. We just want to make sure that you are using it to put on the events that you are planning on putting on. Okay, I think that covers the questions. Okay.
Great questions. No, that's great. And good to know about Now Playing Utah. We can make sure, to check on that. Okay. So now I think the next part of this is we want to talk about the evaluation really quickly. So you'll be required to submit an evaluation report using ZoomGrants that shows how you used your ZAP funds. So your evaluation should be completed in ZoomGrants as soon as the fiscal period in which you've expended your 2020 funds is completed, as you will be asked to report on the budgetary actuals for that year. Your evaluation will be available on your 2020 application on a tab that will say evaluation. So much like the contract tab, it'll pop up there. As part of your evaluation, you'll be asked to verify how you are acknowledging ZAP. Please retain PDFs of media with the ZAP logo, and remember to take photos of ZAP recognition at your events to upload to your evaluation, as well as, again, the screenshots for Now Playing Utah to show that you have complied with that as well. So failure to submit an evaluation will disqualify you from future funding. The final deadline for your evaluation is March 31st, 2 years after the reward cycle. So for example, this year's 2020 evaluation's final deadline is March 31st, 2022. However, that's a long lag time, so we strongly recommend you completing it as soon as the fiscal year during which you spent your funding is closed.
And Kirsten, can I make a quick comment?
Yes.
Just on the evaluation side, for those of you who were funded in 2019, you received a flurry of emails from me about a month ago about some changes that we had made to the 2019 evaluation, specifically as we were trying to adapt our reporting as quickly as possible to what was happening with COVID. So you are already probably familiar with some of the changes, but the evaluations will now have some questions in ZoomGrants. You will need to submit that ZoomGrants evaluation, but it will include a link that will take you to an outside form that allows us to capture the data much more efficiently so that we can use it to communicate your stories better to elected officials. One of the changes we had to make with this is what Kirsten had just mentioned about finishing your evaluation as soon as the fiscal period is over. In previous years, we've asked you to fill it out as soon as the activity that was funded was completed, but to allow us to again, communicate your stories better to elected officials and to represent you all as best as possible. We're asking now that you complete your evaluation when that fiscal period is over and you have the budgetary actuals to be able to provide to us, because that gives us some information that we find we end up being asked sometimes, and we want to be able to communicate it accurately so that it reflects all of the good work that you're all doing. So if you have any questions about some of the changes to the evaluations, please let us know. But for example, if you set your fiscal time period, the 12-month period in which you're expending funds, to be January 2021 to December 2021, the activity you're doing is, say, in June, we're still going to ask you to wait until after December 2021 when you have the budgetary actuals to let us know your revenues and your expenses in that form specifically. So again, if you have any questions or experience any difficulties or have any feedback for how we can improve it, please let us know. But we're trying to make this so that what we're providing for the information that we get requested from elected officials is as accurate and reflecting you all as best as possible. Great.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. That is so important to mention. I'm glad you mentioned that. And just to say, the form that this is steering you to when you go into ZoomGrants after you answered the few questions, it is a secure form. You know, we keep this information safe. We share it upon request. If like Jen said, if there is a council member who wants a story and things like that, but just know that we still all of your information is secure, and even if we send you outside of ZoomGrants, that is still secure as well. Okay. The next thing on here, really, before I hand it off to Jen, is speaking of ZoomGrants. ZoomGrants is really a big tool that we use to contact your organization throughout the year with different notifications, such as your contract is ready to sign or your application has been approved. So in order to make sure that your contacts are receiving these emails from us and that they don't go into the trash or into your unsafe senders list, we recommend that you add notices at zoomgrants.com or any emails that have at zoomgrants.com to your safe sender or whitelist, and that your contacts are always up to date in our system, which you can go back and log in anytime to update those contacts. But we actually cannot update the contacts for you. It is much faster if you do that yourself. And we know if you have a volunteer turnover or if you have a new treasurer come on, that happens. We know around this time that needs to happen. So you should be able to log into ZoomGrants and on your account profile, update those settings, or in the application, update those contacts. And if you run into questions about that, please let us know. I'm trying to see what else on here I need to hit on. I think that kind of sums it up. So, but anytime, and many of you are great about this already, if you have received funding from us, anytime there's a change in your organization, just giving us a general heads up is greatly appreciated as well, just so we know we're not sending emails to the wrong people. Okay, Jen, I think that's all for the contractual obligation side. It looks like we have a couple questions. And I
Yes,
think
we do have a couple. So I've responded to a couple of these in there, but I think we just had a question come through from tech that said, can we apply for the same grant within this cycle or just after its evaluation? So every year within each ZAP cycle, you're able to apply once. So for all of you attending this workshop today, your funding for 2020, which is the application that you submitted back at the end of May or March, depending on when you ended up submitting it, was approved by County Council just earlier this week. So that funding we will continue to refer to as your 2020 funding. That is the name of the application in ZoomGrants. You will not receive the payment for your 2020 funding until 2021, which we will be talking about here in just a couple of minutes to let you know the full timeline of that. So you will report on your 2020 funding no later than the end of March 2022. You ultimately will have the final deadline is 2 years essentially from when you applied. But for every cycle, you'll only be able to apply once. So for those of you who applied this year, you'll all be receiving your funding, and then next year you can apply for the 2021 cycle, for which you'll need to submit a 2019 evaluation if you did receive 2019 funding. And as we move forward with that, we'll provide you with more instructions to try to make that as explicit as possible so you're not feeling like you're navigating murky waters, because we know sometimes the timing of the years can get a little squirrely. But moving forward, like Kirsten mentioned, if you can keep that contact information up to date, and we'll continue to communicate with you through ZoomGrants. You may also receive emails. Oftentimes, a lot of them will come from me. So it'll be jwaterhouse@slco.org, which is the email that we showed you in the beginning, and we'll bring it up at the end as well. But also, probably the best way to stay abreast of updates for the program is to sign up for our ZAP monthly newsletter. So the way that you will do this, if you have not already signed up, is by going to our website, and you will go to the tools for grantees and applicants link. And we're continually building out this page to try to make this as convenient of a resource for you as possible, so you're not having to dig too far into our website to find the easy links that you need. And then right at the very top, we have a sign up for the ZAP mailing list link. And this is appropriate for anyone in your organization who should be aware of what's happening with ZAP. We will give you updates as to funding, if there's anything for receiving your funding, for signing your contracts, when a new application opens, all of that information will be in there. We'll also provide information about any promotional opportunities that we might have available to you. Of course, like Kirsten mentioned in the beginning, we are a two-person team, and there are 2 of us and over 200 of you, but we do our very, very best to try to do as much as possible to get your information and your events out to the community, because we want to make sure that we are bolstering and supporting what you're doing, because it is what makes our community so vibrant. Also in this newsletter, we'll include information about outside funding sources if they come across our desk, or other industry or community related information that we find might be important for you to know. So this is a really good thing to have people sign up for in the event there could be something in there that would be useful for what you guys are doing. And moving forward, if you don't already have this email saved, please do. So przap@slco.org. As a ZAP grantee, we would like to have you send us the information about your events that you would like shared with the public. We do our best to share this as equitably as possible through our social media channels. So we have an active Facebook page and an Instagram. We do have a Twitter account that we use especially to share out things that might be relevant to elected officials, but things that you find interesting and are sharing with your audiences and your newsletter list are the things that we would like to have information on. And then we'll pull from this, and then it helps us to keep really informative, engaging content for the community that we are able to interact with on social media the same way that you guys do as well. And if you have any questions about the PRZAP account, please let me know. But we do check that regularly. We also have some promotional opportunities that are not contractual obligations. Sending us your information to the PRZAP account is a contractual obligation, so please be sure that you communicate that to your marketing staff or volunteers. But then on our social media streams, especially, and on our website, we have some things that might be useful to your organization. And Kirsten and I have also been working on the Salt Lake County Small Business Impact Grant over the past 6 or 7 months. So we may have been a little quieter on some of these things, such as the blog posts or our Facebook page, as we've also been assisting the county with getting that CARES Act funding into the community. But we will be refocusing on Ticket Tuesday and the blog again. So that has just been quiet, but it's by no means gone. So you'll be seeing a lot more of that coming up in the next couple of months now that we're in a new cycle. One thing that Kirsten mentioned earlier, but I do want to note it again here, is that your events do need to be in compliance with public health policy. So when you are sending us events that you'd like for us to promote for you online, or to do a Ticket Tuesday giveaway, or to share it with the board, we just want to make sure that you're checking that those events are in line with current safety policy for the public. We're only able to promote things that are in compliance with that. If we end up having any questions about it, we might let you know, though in general, we trust and know that you guys are all working so hard to make sure that everything is in line with that. So we're looking forward to promoting all of that for you, and we'll let you know if you have any questions. So that said, we do have a few things that we think will be useful for you. So our ZAP Ticket Tuesday giveaway is a giveaway that we run via Facebook, though we do promote it on Instagram as well. This is anything that your organization is holding that you would like to have a little bit of a boost for the public to be able to see. And we do promote this and run ads for it on Facebook as well. We will tag your organization. It starts on a Tuesday and then it ends on the following Tuesday. We'll pick winners and then we'll give them whatever the attendance information is you have for them. So that would be you basically giving a couple of tickets for us to be able to give away to a performance that you might have or an event that you might have coming up. We will have opportunities for this for your online events as well, which is something that will be newer, I think, for all of us since we've been using online events so much more, but we're excited to be able to help promote that as well. So if you have questions about that, please let me know. I usually schedule these out several months in advance. You can contact me 6 months ahead of time for an event going on and I can put it on the calendar. If you have a last minute event coming up that you'd really like in there, you can contact me and I'll see if we can put it on the schedule, if we can fit it in. And then we can chat about details from there. But I would ask that you go to the Tools for Grantees and Applicants page, and then we have a form, a request a ZAP Ticket Tuesday giveaway form that you'll fill out that emails me directly, and then I'll contact you back afterward to set it up. One other thing, or two other things that we do have our ZAP blog, which we use to be able to communicate with the public and to elected officials the stories of what's happening with your organization. So we'd love to have you contribute to the blog, especially stories right now of how you are adapting to COVID and the new events and things that you have coming in the next several months. We'd love to be able to give that a boost as much as we can. These aren't press releases. These are blogs that are written in a personal voice. They're typically about 600 words. We love to have lots of images with them if we can, and then we share them out through all of our social media streams so that people are able to see them. And as we're moving closer to reauthorization, these stories are especially important for us to capture, and we'll be referring back to them to be able to pull tidbits out to share as we are communicating with the community when we get to 2024, which is not actually that far away. And the last thing on here that is an annual opportunity that we have is our ZAP Kids Summer Passport. Unfortunately, this past year, because of the craziness that has happened over the past 8 or 9 months, we did have to delay the passport to 2021, but we will be holding the passport as a clean year. Kirsten and I are working on altering it as needed to make sure that it is both useful for your organizations and also reflects the county's priorities for safety for the community. But it's a really great vehicle for being able to share your summer events that are family oriented with the public. So the kids get a cute little booklet, which might be an online thing next year, depending on what we're dealing with, where they can collect little stamps of where they're going. And then we have a schedule online that includes your events that they can choose from to go to. But we'll have more information available for that at the top of next year. So you'll hear from us likely mid to late January for exactly what's going to be going on with the passport. Okay, so that's promotional opportunities. And moving forward, we have a couple more reminders about your funds that we just want to make sure that you are fully aware of. And this is also in your contract, so you can read it, but hopefully it's a little more interesting to hear us talk about it. The contract's a little bit dry. So that said, it is really important to remember that your grant, it is considered public funds. So because of this, the county is able to audit your use of funds as necessary throughout the year. One of the things that you might be receiving communication from Kirsten and I about over the next year is just confirming that you are able to finish using your funds. We're wrapping up that conversation with people for 2019 funding. You might have a similar communication from us about the 2020 funding, just to make sure that we are helping to support you and what you need with your funding as much as possible. Failure to comply with the terms of your contract is grounds for withholding your public funding, and it can also be grounds for terminating future funding. So it just is important to be sure that you are aware of all of the things you're agreeing to when you sign that contract. One other thing that we did want to make sure everybody knows is that now that the County Council has approved the Cycles Tier 2 awards, the applications minus protected content like your board contact information are considered public record. So what this means is a member of the public can request a copy of your ZAP application via a grammar request. And if this happens, we will provide that information that is public, but we'll also let you know that someone has requested it, just so that you're aware when something has been shared with the public. Let's see, we had a couple of questions that I'm just going to jump back to before I move on to our next slide about your disbursements. Let's see, we had a question about whether the ZAP Summer Passport Program can include seniors. So the Kids Summer Passport Program is very specifically family focused. It absolutely can be multi-generational activities. But that said, it doesn't specifically include senior only events. Those are things that it might be more appropriate for us to promote via social media instead. Okay, terrific. So moving, yes, Kirsten, go ahead.
I just want to say just above that, Leslie, if you have ideas, we're always open to talking about that too. That's something we can chat about as well, but ultimately deferring to what Jen said. And just so everybody can see, I put a link to the tools and resources page on the ZAP website in the chat as well. So check that out too if you want to sign up for the newsletter and you haven't. Okay.
Cool. Thank you. That's perfect. Okay, so the important part about your funding disbursements. So your 2020 funding will be disbursed in 2021. If your organization indicated that the time period for which you were expending your funds was 2020, that's okay. Essentially, you would be backdating that funding. So what you allocate your funds to should still be determined by what you actually entered into your application itself. But for when you have cash in hand, this year, what you can anticipate is you'll be receiving the first disbursements of funds February 2021. We're anticipating early February. We will keep in close contact with you on that, though. Kirsten and I do try to get these processed as fast as possible, but the timeline for Tier 2 shifted just a little bit. So your first payment will be 60% of your overall award, and then you'll receive your second payment in May of 2021, which will be the remaining 40% of that award. And as Kirsten mentioned in the very beginning, if for some reason tax revenues change and the overall projected awards need to be adjusted, we will make sure that you are informed, and it would be your second payment that might get adjusted. So just something to generally keep in mind. One other thing that we want to make sure that you guys are aware of is, in order for you to get paid, your vendor information with the county does need to be up to date. For the majority of you, it will already be up to date, but if you are either new to ZAP this year, or if you've had some change in your banking information, so this could be if you've changed the name of your organization, if you've changed bank accounts, if you've changed contact information for your payment information, that's all information that we're going to need from you, and we need for you to fill out a new vendor management form. You all received a notification email for the approval of your funding today, and there was a link in there that I've been informed does not work. So if you do need to have that updated, please send me an email and I'll send you the form. I'll also be sending out the correct link for that. But we'll have you fill out the vendor management form, and then you're going to send it directly to me, and then I'll make sure that it gets sent to accounts payable, because there are a few things that we have to do on our end. But you can find this form by, I will have a link here that will be updated later today. So again, if you go to the tools for grantees and applicants, it's the Salt Lake County vendor management form, and then there's a link to email it to me when you are finished with that. Now, as a recipient of ZAP funds, we do expect that you are going to maintain reasonable and appropriate insurance in accordance with industry standards. Now, you all come from different industries, and your industries do have varying standards for what insurance is required. So we do trust that you will know what that insurance is, what is appropriate, and that you will have it. So we won't dictate what that might be for you. Now, we are recording this workshop, and we will be releasing the recording early next week. I'll send out an email that has a link to it, and we'll give you a copy of the slides as well, so that you can share this with individuals in your organization who might be interacting with your ZAP funds or the programming that is being funded. So this could be your board leadership, your development staff, finance, marketing, programming, or if it's not staff and you work with volunteers, then it'd be those individuals. So we want to make sure that anybody who we might be working with or who might be working with your funds is aware of the contractual obligations. You can also add these people as collaborators to your application at any time in the event you haven't already. I do have a resource link that we'll provide that gives you step-by-step instructions for how to add collaborators. I'll also show you that today, how to do that when we actually go into your contract and demonstrate how to sign it. So that brings us to actually signing your contract. But before I bring up ZoomGrants, I just want to double check if Kirsten, if I've missed anything, and then also if there are any questions right now that anyone has that you'd like for us to cover before we move into actually showing you how to access your contract and then how to sign it.
I think we are all caught up on questions so far.
Great.
So yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, terrific. Then I'm going to go ahead and we will look at ZoomGrants itself.
While she's pulling that up, I just want to say how nice it is to see you all.
Yes, it's so good to see your faces. I feel like we haven't seen anyone in so long. Okay. And I know that Kirsten had mentioned this at the very beginning, but just as a reminder, because we are working remotely, in the event that you are needing to meet with us, please do contact us ahead of time, because if you do come into the office, there's a good chance that you might find a closed door, and we just want to make sure that you're able to access us and talk with us whenever you do need to. Okay, so accessing your ZoomGrants application, all of you are pros at this already. So you're going to go to https www.zoomgrants.com/login, and then you're going to type in whatever email you've used for your application and your password, and then you'll click login. And this is going to take you to your My Account homepage. And now the application that was previously in this incomplete applications box over here is going to be under the approved applications box on the right-hand side, because you have all now been approved for your 2020 funding. And so you'll find your 2020 application. If you've been approved for multiple years, this list might look a lot longer. And then you're going to click into that application specifically. We oftentimes will have questions about who is the right person to sign your contracts. Specifically, you will determine who the right person is to sign your contracts. This person needs to have the authority to be able to contractually bind your organization with Salt Lake County. And in the event there are any discussions or questions that we have about your contract, they would be the person that the county would come to discuss that with. So oftentimes this is the executive director, or sometimes it will be the board president, but this will be a member of your leadership. And we trust that you will, whoever you have signed that is the person that Kirsten and I should go to should we have any contractual questions specifically. We had a question from John Olson saying, I just got added as a collaborator by our grant specialist. I'll just need to set up a new login. Correct. Yes, you will. If you don't already have a ZoomGrants account, you will need to. And then if you need assistance with that, shoot Kirsten and I an email, and we're really happy to walk you through that step by step, because there are just a few specific places you'll want to look into. Okay, so you are in your application. And in the event that you are the application owner, but you're not the person who's supposed to sign the contract, you will need to add them as a collaborator. So the space that you will add them as a collaborator, you can minimize instructions. It's going to be on the application summary tab. And then you're going to scroll about halfway down the page to the collaborators section here. So you can see that I have added several versions of myself as collaborators onto my application. And let's say that the Jay Meadfeld, the board member, is the individual that needs to sign the contract. So this person cannot see or sign the contract until you have clicked the editing access specifically. They might be able to see and edit the application itself because you gave them permission for that. But if they don't have the box clicked under ZAP 2020 Tier 2 contract, they won't be able to sign it. They'll try to type it in and it won't let it do anything. So you'd need to go in and let's say give them permission here in order to sign it, which means that when that Jen Waterhouse signs in, she can go in and actually sign the contract. So double check that your contract signer, if it's not you, the person who owns the application, is added as a collaborator. They will need to have their own ZoomGrants account, and you need to click this contract checkbox over here. That's typically where, if someone can't sign, where they get caught up a little bit. Okay, so let's say though, as the application owner, I am the person who needs to sign it, or I'm the collaborator who has logged in. They'll find the application the same way and they'll come in. So you now have a new tab here that was not here yesterday, the ZAP 2020 Tier 2 contract tab. And from here, it's really easy. It should be pretty slick. We do have some instructions for you that basically just reiterates what I'm telling you right now and what Kirsten mentioned earlier. But if you do need a reminder, this goes over that in detail. So you have your contract text here. We know that a lot of you have been funded in ZAP for several years. We do recommend just browsing through it one more time, making sure that you feel comfortable with everything that is in here. This is the standard contract that you have seen year to year. So you'll scroll all the way down to the bottom. It's also lovely nighttime reading in the event you need to be able to get to sleep. And then down toward the bottom, you'll have two sections. So there are going to be multiple signatures that you're going to need to enter in here. Similar to every other part of ZoomGrants that you've filled in, when you type into a text box, when you click outside of it, it automatically saves it for you. And then in order to see the signatures, you'll have to refresh the page. So like Kirsten had mentioned earlier, you're going to have 2 to 3 exhibits depending on your application. Everyone will have exhibit 1, which is a copy of your application, which we recommend that you download and save somewhere that you can then access it later, though you will always be able to access your application 24 hours a day on ZoomGrants itself. But if you need to have the copy of it, that's an easy way to do it. And then we have the copy of the logo and acknowledgement guide. So to download these, you'll click on them, it'll bring up this pop-up box, and then you'll be able to save it to your computer. And then you can do that for both of them. In the event that there was something that you mentioned in your application that was not allowable per ZAP policy to be able to spend funds on, we have noted specifically what that is. And so you might have an Exhibit 3 letter that basically says you can't spend your funds on this one thing. You can spend it on everything else that you ended up asking for. If you do have an Exhibit 3 letter, please do read it carefully. And then if you have any questions at all, contact Kirsten and I, and we're really happy to discuss that with you and make sure that you feel comfortable with how you're using your funds. So you've gone through, you've downloaded all of these, saved them in a safe place on your computer, made sure that anybody who might need access to them is going to have access to them. And then to sign for these, in previous years, we have asked you to type a lot of information in of your name and your title and your organization. We'd love for you to just type your full name in, and that will be your signature. So I'm going to go ahead and I will sign for these. You can see I typed it in, I clicked outside of the box, and then you're going to get a saving button here. And ZoomGrants might be doing me a small favor there. If the saving button comes up, or that little screen comes up and it does not go away, it just stays forever, that means that for some reason ZoomGrants didn't save your signature. So you can double click outside of it to make it go away, but you'll need to refresh the page and go back and type it again to make it save. It's uncommon, but if you do run into it, that's what a saving box that doesn't go away means. It just means it didn't save. This one did though, so you can see that it now says signature will appear here when the page is refreshed. So I'm going to go ahead and save out each of these. So I have now contractually accepted each of these documents. And then the very last thing that you need to do is you'll go down to the bottom here on the left-hand side. It'll have the name of your organization and then a box for you to be able to sign in. And then again, you're just going to type your full name. As you can see here, if you have typed things into text boxes previously, your computer might auto-populate that text. Just double check that you have the right thing typed in there that you would like to have typed in there before you actually click outside of the box. But I'm going to click outside of the box, it saved it, and now the signature will appear when the page is refreshed. So if I scroll up to the top of the page, over here on this side, upper right-hand side at the very top is a button that says refresh page. This is the best and easiest way to do it to make sure that ZoomGrants doesn't get creative with the way that it's refreshed things. So I've clicked that, and then I'm going to click the contract tab again. And then when we scroll down this time, you'll see that we have signatures. So under the documents that I just signed for, it has my full name. It does include the date and the time it's signed. And then it also includes the email address for the account that was signed, and it includes the IP address, which is the information that we need in order to make this legally binding. And so that's down here as well for that. And believe it or not, that's it. All you need to do is type in all of those. I'm just going to back up real quick so that we can do from the beginning a zoom through one more time so you can see how to get here. So I'm going to go back to my account home. So again, the approved applications box over here on the right-hand side, I'm going to click my 2020 application. If I'm not the one signing it and I need to add a collaborator, I'll go to the application summary tab, which is the first tab that you come to. I'll scroll about halfway down, and then I'll make sure they are a collaborator and also that they have access to the contract itself. When the person who is signing it comes in to this page, then you'll click the ZAP 2020 Tier 2 Contract tab. You can minimize the instructions if you're already good and you know them. And then review your contract before you sign it. Then download and review your documents that you have here, and then sign for each of them by typing your full name into the box and clicking outside of the box after each time. And then scroll to the very bottom, and on the bottom left-hand side, you will type your name into the box that's there, click outside of it, and then it's finished. So,
Jen, can I jump in with a tip?
please, yes.
So as Jen mentioned, we've been helping out with other grants at the county, and we had a high volume of digital signatures that needed to happen for their contract as well. And some of you have probably experienced this, where we have seen consistently, if you are using the Safari web browser, which would default, it would be your default browser on an iPhone or a MacBook or whatever, it likes to kick you out when you're typing, and it will just, a lot of people will say, oh, I typed in my first letters and it saved and it kicked me out, and it wouldn't let me sign the contract again. So if you run into that, we recommend you use a different, try a different computer or a different web browser. And then also, if you find that as you've typed in your signature, if something was weird or it auto-populated your email, say, instead of your name, let us know as soon as you can, because we'll easily be able to go in and rescind that signature, and we get a click a little button on our end, and then it lets you sign it again. So just a quick tip, if you run into any technical issues with typing in your name and signing your contract. And then we have a good question from Fanny in the chat that I can address, or unless we need to touch on anything else, Jen.
I think that is actually it for covering the contract. So I think we can go ahead and just open up to any questions that anybody might have.
Fabulous. So yeah, again, please put your questions in the chat. A reminder, your contract signing deadline is November 6th, which Jen has up here in red, which is nice to see. Fanny's question is ZAP funding supposed to be matched with other non-public funding? And this will be a challenge for them. So we asked that ZAP funding be matched with any other sources of funding except for in-kind. So if it was earned donations, if it was private contribution or earned revenue, private contributions, other government funding, other private funding, anything like that, we count that all towards the match. We just don't necessarily count in-kind towards your ZAP match. How that said, we understand a lot of you are going to face plenty of challenges this year. So our default is reach out and talk to us if you have any concerns about funding and meeting that match. So I hope that answers the question. And if are there any other questions? Or Jen,
yes,
anything else we want to remind
did
people
have
about?
a quick question about receiving feedback on the application and seeing how they're scored. You will be able to see this. Kirsten and I are just going through and making sure that all of the comments are in the right place in your application so that you can see them. So we expect in the next 1 to 2 weeks, we'll have finished all of this. We're doing it as quickly as we can, but you'll receive another email from us when your scores and comments are ready to be viewed. In the event that you have any questions at that point or before that, feel free to send us an email, but you'll get them and we are working on them and we'll make sure that you have them just within the next little bit. We also had a question from Tech, is the contract available for today to sign on it? And it is. Yes. If you go into your contract and you see anything different from what Kirsten and I described, please send us an email before signing it so I can make sure that you have all of your documents. But at this point, your contract should be available in ZoomGrants with all of the text and your additional documents, and then you'll follow the same steps that we just showed you right now. Let's see. We have another question. Are there any activities beside the ones stated in the application before one has to return to funds? This is a really good question. So Gulam was asking about, I believe, how the funding can be used and whether the activities needed to be stated in your application. Kirsten and I have been working really closely with the DA's office to make sure that all of the funds that are expended are spent according to policy. So the answer to this is actually very individual for each organization. So if you have any question of how you are currently spending your funds, if you have 2019 funding, or for your 2020 funds, if your plans vary at all from what you described in your application, contact Kirsten or I before signing your contract so that we can have that conversation and make sure that whatever the plan is for the way you're expending your funds is in line with policy. And then whatever we need to do from there for the steps to make sure that it's taken care of properly, we'll help you with. But it's going to need to be an individual conversation depending on what's going on.
Jen,
yes.
Does it make sense to add that if they have noted in their application that they're basically applying for general operating support as opposed to one specific project, you tend to be covered if you're making small changes and little shifts here and there. And we'll put this on, we'll let you determine if you need to reach out to us or not. But generally speaking, for those of you that are using this for general operating support, such as salaries, equipment, marketing, online events, things like that, we would assume that it's still going to be some version of that. So. Yeah,
if it's markedly different, let us know. But for the most part, most of these conversations, if you do need to reach out, are really just a touch base. If it is a more complicated conversation, then we'll definitely have that with you, help guide you through it, and make sure that we're able to help you as much as possible. Okay, so Fanny has asked, this year, most of our events went virtual. How do you measure an accurate attendance of events? Most of them are on social media. If it's a video, they can see how many people have seen it. Does it count as attendance? Yes, thank you for asking this. So we have been communicating with other funders and doing some research in terms of some, ideally, the best ways to help you report these numbers. I'm actually hoping to be able to create either a guide or perhaps a workshop. I'm saying this as it's coming to me, and Kirsten, I'll talk with you about this a little later, just to be able to discuss how to report these a little better. But say if you are doing a Facebook Live event or on YouTube, they do have attendance metrics, and usually they'll give you individual users, and then they'll give you views. So we have given you in your evaluation a way to report either one of those things. So yes, gather that information for it. That is what we will count as attendance for now. As our understanding of the best ways and best practices for reporting virtual event attendance continues to grow, we will absolutely share that with you to make sure that you have all of the information that we can give you to help support you with that. Okay, let's see. Can a performer be paid if the event was canceled due to financial hardship for them? Kirsten, I'm going to punt this one to you.
Yes, so we have been having conversations with other grantees for your 2019 funds where they have used the funds to pay for costs associated with canceling the event. So you're still technically within within the parameters of your contract, because you technically are using the funds for the intended activity. And we do, so short answer is yes. Also at ZAP, we love paying artists. So many of you are using these funds for things like rent and things like paying artists and payroll. So please, yeah, that would be appropriate. And we would just have you note that in your final evaluation.
Let's see. So Fanny had asked, is there a format you can share as part of the grant report? Yes, in fact, I'm going to bring up the grant report itself so that you can have an idea of that as it stands as a contractual obligation. So give me just one moment to bring this up. So I'll show you what it looks like in our grant reporting right now for the form that we're going to have to have you fill out when you're ready to. And let me just go to that real quick.
And while Jen is finding that, we are happy to provide resources on ways to track attendance and things like that. And we also are keeping in mind the reality that this next year is going to be weird as everybody's moving online and tracking things. So we want to do what we can to support best practices in that area. We, of course, are invested in having participants from Salt Lake County. We understand you're going to have your participant base is going to be larger than that. So we also are prepared to are taking basically an attitude as funders of kindness and flexibility and wanting to help you succeed. So just take that as the overtone for this going into next year.
Yeah, so we are definitely all learning how to do this the best way possible. And also, if you're finding ways that have been very effective for you to track events and that kind of a thing, we'd love to hear it. One other thing that I would recommend, it's not currently asked in the evaluation, but just as a general best practice with funders is if you're able to communicate how you marketed an online event to that community. So for example, if you can explain how you marketed an online event to Salt Lake County specifically, that's a good thing to just kind of have in your back pocket because the way that you're outreaching to these communities, I think we'll likely see that becoming a more relevant conversation as a lot of these events are, many of them are held online and tracking the geographic data is possible, but can sometimes be a little challenging. Okay, I'm just going to share this form real quick, and we're not going to focus too much on it, but I just want to give you a preview of it so that you can feel more comfortable with what we've been talking about. So this is the 2019, we're calling it additional funding questions, but they're not really additional. These are the same ones that you answered before. They're just in a form that makes it a lot easier for us to be able to pull from and to make dashboards and use the data. So you'll answer the same information that you normally do, giving us your contact information. We're going to have you remind us of when you said you were going to spend your funds and how much money you had. And then if you had to spend your funds differently due to COVID, we'll have you note that just a yes or no so that we're able to know if that was the case. And then we'll ask how you spent it, which is a question that you have answered every time that you filled out an evaluation if you've been funded beforehand. And then also we've added a question here just to give you a small opportunity to share the narrative and the story of how you have impacted the Salt Lake community, because we know that you have great experiences and we'd like to be able to capture those more. So that's a new question. Then we have some revenue and expense questions, which we've asked before. We're asking about your staffing, which we've asked before, but then under events and attendance. So the way that we've changed this to hopefully make it a little easier for you to answer is we'll ask you the kinds of events that you've held, online or in person. You can select both or either. If you're selecting in person, it'll ask you the same questions that we've asked in the past. How many you held, how many were free, how many attended, how many free attendees you had. But for the online event side of it now, we have more options because you could capture this data in multiple ways. So we'd like to know how many you held, how many of them were free, and then we've asked you how you tracked it. If you tracked it via unique users, via unique views, if you did it in some different way, or if you didn't track the attendance. So depending on your answers here, it'll bring up additional boxes for you to fill out. So let's say you tracked it via unique users as opposed to views. So we'll ask how many you had and how many of them were free. And then we'll do the same for unique views, how many views you had, how many were free. And then if you tracked it in a different way, we'll just give you a box to describe how to do that. So we're not telling you exactly which way you need to track it, just because depending on the software you use, you may have more or less of an ability to track that in different ways. We are expecting that you will track it, and we'd just like to know what you have tracked, how you tracked it, and then we'd like to hear about the impact from there. And then if you have any other additional commentary about your events, we'd love to hear it. If you haven't filled out your 2019 evaluation yet, that's something we'd love for you to note, because we'll be capturing that. And ideally, we'd love to be able to share some of this information out with the group so that everybody can benefit from a lot of what we're learning here. So that's what it will look like in the evaluation and how we're currently asking it. We'll likely be continuing to update that as the standard, whatever the best practice is for collecting that data as we get more information on that. Okay, so can we use some of the funds to get help with equipment to do online programming? Yes, one thing that we would like for you to keep in mind is ZAP funds can't be used for capital expenses. A big umbrella sense, capital expenses is equipment that's going to last more than 5 years or is considered permanent. If your organization has a different capital expense policy that you can share with us, we typically will default to that instead for whatever your board has approved. Kirsten, is there anything that I should add to that?
Yeah, no, that was great. I think it's just being consistent with how your accountant or how you're doing your books. So if you bought something that you would track depreciation on, we wouldn't want you to use ZAP funding for that. The reason we have this policy for ZAP funding is basically because there are many times potentially other funding sources at the county, say through the track fund or through other sources that will go towards capital expenses. So that helps us not ensure funds aren't being crossed over. So if it's something you would normally depreciate, then you wouldn't use it. You wouldn't be able to use that funding for it. But if it's smaller equipment or stuff that is part of essential to everyday operations, it would generally fall on the allowable side of things we can fund. But please reach out to us with those questions.
Great. And they had said a few mics and a Wemo for live casting they had in mind. Then yes, those kinds of things have definitely been allowable. And so long as it's within your capitalization policy, like Kirsten was saying, then you're good to go. Let's see. We also had a question. If we can't use the funds, do we give them back? Yes. However, if you find yourself in this position, and some of you we've been having these conversations with already, definitely talk with Kirsten and I about it, because your situations are all very individual. Ultimately, it is down to policy and the guidance that we have received from the DA's office. But we are wanting to make sure, again, that we're supporting you as best as possible. We know this is a really chaotic time. And if there's anything we can do to help you with that, we'll guide you through the policy to make sure that it fits your situation, basically. Let's see. Does ZAP have any best practice advice for arts and cultural organizations shifting events online? This is something that I know Kirsten and I are wanting to talk more about. We are definitely happy to connect organizations with other similar organizations who are doing similar work, who perhaps have experienced successes or had really good lessons with what's been working. I'd love to be able to arrange something for ZAP grantees to share this information better. Right now, we don't have a solid date or event planned to do that, but it's definitely on our radar. So I would say you'll be hearing more about that from us over the next little bit.
And Jen, to add on to that, could I say, if any of you out there, you guys are our actually greatest source of information. If any of you have had stories about successes, or maybe even things that didn't go very well, we would love to hear from you too, because that can help us. The more we can connect you with each other, the better. So please feel free to let us know if something went really well, or if you had some really solid lessons learned from doing this. We would love to share that with the collective group.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, is it possible or acceptable for our organization to request a copy of other organizations' applications to prepare us for the next application? They'd love to see samples. Yes, so this is what we were referring to earlier with your applications now being a matter of public record. In the event you are wanting to request to see any applications, you would go through the same procedure that any member of the public or the press would go through by submitting a grammar request. So if you have, if you're wanting to make this request, feel free to contact Kirsten or I, and we'll be able to help you with it. But it is not uncommon for grantees to ask to see applications of similar organizations just to see how they applied and what they were responding with. Okay, Fanny said that she'd like to talk to us about a specific question. Can we make an appointment? Yes, absolutely. If you have something very specific to your organization that you, this is not the right venue to discuss it, please email Kirsten and I, and then we will set up a time to be able to talk with you. It's easiest for us to be able to actually schedule a meeting with you to make sure that we have enough time to be able to discuss it with you thoroughly. So send an email. We'll be able to talk with you here as quickly as is convenient for you, and we can continue on with that. Let's see. So can you please give us a quick outline for the source of ZAP funds and the future of the program? Yes, we can. Kirsten, I'm going to have you do that because I know you've been having this conversation frequently recently.
Yes, and I'm assuming this is the all overall like revenue source, where we're headed and how things are looking. So I'm going to speak to that, and if I'm wrong, let me know, Michael. So the ZAP program is funded through a local option tax. In Salt Lake County, we call it the ZAP tax. It's more widely known as the RAP tax, and it is basically what is it? It is set up in state statute where we collect every year 0.1% of sales and use tax within Salt Lake County, goes into a special account just for us. And following statute, because we are a county of the first class, beyond Salt Lake County, there is a lot more, it is a lot more open for how this is governed. But within Salt Lake County, we are required to divvy this up in a certain way. So a certain percentage goes to fund large cultural organizations, a certain percentage goes to fund the three zoological organizations, and then 9% of the funding, which is small but mighty, goes to fund our tier 2 groups, which is where you all fall into. And the nice thing about the way the ZAP tax is collected this year, we have held much more steady compared to other tax sources collected at the county level. So which is why we were able to basically allocate the same amount of funding for this 2020 cycle. That said, the fund moving forward, the fund is expected to see a little bit of a dip, much like when we did in the recession. And much like the recession, we saw that impact last for about 2 to 3 years. I think many of us can argue we might see an even bigger impact. But for now, for this year, we are holding pretty steady. Next year, as we see projections be laid out and as we see the revenues come in, we will keep everybody up to date on that. But for now, we are anticipating seeing things to be pretty flat. And then it might take a few years to get back up to the levels where we were seeing a lot of growth year to year. The next few years are probably going to be flat, and we'll keep you all informed on that. But the ZAP program is here to stay. It is reauthorized every 10 years. So the next time it will be on the ballot for vote is going to be 2024. So you'll be seeing a lot of communication from us in the next couple of years. So, so overall, things are actually looking pretty good for this program right now. But we'll all stay in the loop with you guys on any changes and what comes up. So what else could I hit on in that realm, Jen? I probably gave them way more history than they needed.
I think that okay. Michael, if there was anything else that you wanted to add or for us to add on to that, just let us know. Perfect. And then Fanny had asked, are there any measures on money granted and how many events and programs are expected per amount received? Let's say they received 10,000, how many programs would you expect to see? This is actually extremely individual to your organizations. One of the discussions that the board frequently has is how much they understand that some organizations focus across a very large area and serve a very large number of people. Whereas other organizations have fewer events, but tend to have very deep experiences and very, very in-depth experiences. Both of these have value to the board and obviously to the Salt Lake community. So when you are filling out your applications, when we come back to next year's cycle, really what is most important is that you are explaining the value and the reach and the impact of your program and how you would use the money and best put the funds to use, because that story really is going to be different for every organization, and the board really dedicates themselves to reviewing your organizations as individual entities and viewing what you do in the scope of what you are describing. Perfect, great. And then if we had submitted on using the funding in 2020 prior to signing the contract, is that allowed to use toward those events? Yes. So the eligible funding, the eligible time period in which ZAP funds can be expended for each cycle is actually a 2-year period in which you have selected the 12-month fiscal period that you're spending it in. So for the 2020 funds, it is allowable for those funds to be spent or allocated toward expenses made anywhere between January 2020 and December 2021, which is where, when Kirsten mentioned earlier, if you are not able to expend your funds by December 31, 2021, then you would need to return those funds to the county. So it's very important that you talk to us before that so that we can have a discussion with you about any changes that have been made to your organization or your programming that would impact the way that you spend them. So if you chose in your application, if the 12-month time period in which you're planning to spend your 2020 funds was January 2020 to December 2020, yes, you can absolutely allocate that funding to the event that you described in your application that had happened prior to signing the contract. We first expect that you will spend your funds in the 12-month time period that you told us in the application. If something changes and you aren't able to spend it within that, let us know. And then, like Kirsten said earlier, it defaults to that December 31st, 2021 date for the very end terminal. That is what policy and our legal teams have as our last deadline. Perfect. Great. If anyone has any other questions, Kirsten and I will go ahead and we're going to stick around for a little bit longer. But I know a lot of you have a lot of busy stuff to go on to at this point. So thank you so much for attending this workshop. We hope that it's been informative, and in the event that it just created more questions, feel free to email Kirsten and I. We're very happy to talk about whatever your individual circumstances are, so that we can make sure you're comfortable before signing it. As a reminder, the deadline is November 6th. That does give you 3 weeks to sign it, as opposed to a longer time period that we typically do. So if you're having any trouble at all with the technology, with accessing ZoomGrants, with getting the contract signers signed up, let us know right away, because we're here to help you and to make that as easy as possible. So thank you.
Thank you all for the thanks. There's so many nice comments.
Yes, thank you. And we really miss seeing you. So thank you for letting us see your wonderful faces.
Yeah, it's good to see you all. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, guys.